I would now like to introduce today's presenters. Rohit Agaral, Vice President, is a leader in Everest Group's global sourcing practice. In his role, Rohit is focused on engagements and initiatives with global companies that focus on GBS shared services centers. Sakshi Garg, Vice President, leads multiple engagements with enterprise buyer clients in the areas of location optimization, GBS, shared services, benchmarking, pure intelligence, and talent strategy. Isham Hamed Rizvi, Senior Analyst, is a member of Everest Group's global sourcing practice, where he assists clients on areas such as strategy design and location and sourcing model optimization. And with that, I would like to turn things over to Rohit Tashwa.
Thanks, Rafael. Welcome everyone to the webinar today. Glad to have you join us. Today's topic, as you all know, is very pertinent. Talent situation has been getting more intense. There is a war for talent, nobody doubts that. And in the last few months, we saw a rapid increase in the demand-supply gap, which created the Great Resignation. And what followed were many attrition waves and then inflationary pressures. Today, this webinar will focus on the longevity of this crisis. Do we expect, are things easing up? Is this intensifying further? What are we seeing from a GBS perspective? And me and my colleagues will share 5 actions which we believe all the GBS leaders should be focusing on to be ahead of the curve in managing the talent demand situation. So we start by looking at some of the recent data and the current situation in the market. Every year we conduct a survey to understand what are the key issues for global executives, and we then dissect the data by various geographies, different client segments. When we look at the key business challenges and we say, what are the GBS leaders concerned about, you will see that talent, whether it's a shortage of skills, is #1 challenge to business this year. We have seen in the recent times how GBS organizations have evolved. They have grown and they have thrived in the last, despite all the challenges, because they have delivered a lot of value for the enterprise. But while they are aspiring and they have the permission and the support to grow and do much more, availability of the right talent in the right places at the right time is creating an evolutionary speed bump. And as you will clearly see, talent was one of the top 5 issues, but consistently ranked 5th in the previous 2 years. But this year, this is the top concern. And everything else seems workable. Let's look at some of the market data to see what is the nature of this concern. So we track more than 200 locations globally for various types of global services across IT, back office, operations, voice. We'll look at some of the business process services talent markets, and we are looking at the leading 12-15 markets. We have shown 2 metrics here. The one with the person with arrows around them is more of a lagging indicator, the attrition in respective markets. And then the other one, the person with those circles around them, is an indicator of the unmet demand. What is the current number of job openings we see? Is it taking too long to fill those positions? And as you'll see across this chart, it's a lot of it is in yellow or red or a mix of the yellow, amber, red. So shows a lot of pressure in the market globally. The nature of the problem is different, local to each of these markets, but this is a global trend. And then we have done similar analysis for other areas. In IT services, particularly digital talent, the situation is even more intense. And as you'll see, the unmet demand shows us that there is limited immediate kind of relief in there. Sakshi, you and your team have been doing a lot of analysis on the latest movements in demand. What changes are you seeing?
Thanks, Rohit. So on the previous slide, we talked about the sustained pressure on talent. I think this sustained pressure is further aggravated by the significant talent demand volatility that we have been observing globally. The chart shows demand for F&A and contact center talent across multiple markets, and all of you are familiar with these markets from a global services delivery standpoint. You will see that the demand has remained significantly high for most of H1 2021. And now we are seeing some signs of market easing, particularly in offshore locations, but we're also expecting another demand spike in 2 to 3 months. Now, some of this expected spike will be due to the ripple effect of companies rebalancing their location portfolios due to ongoing developments in the CE region. So while the demand may be slightly lower than what we saw last year, and there might be a little bit of ease coming into the market, we believe that this is going to be short term. In another 2 3 months, we expect another spike in demand. Let's look at the picture from a supply side perspective, which is actually not very encouraging. What you're seeing here is the population pyramids for North America, Europe, and India. What this is telling us is that in the long term also, the talent supply will be constrained in key markets. Both North America and Europe are showing a decline in the net new working age people who are going to come to the market in the next 5 years. So if you see this chart, the people in the 20 to 24 category or 15 to 19 category are lower than the people in the 25 to 29 categories, consistently in North America, Europe, which means on an annual basis, the number of people joining the job market are going to be lower, which is a cause of concern. On the other hand, India still continues to provide robust talent, and the constraints do not seem to be as huge as they are probably in the North America and the European market. So now we have talked about these constraints and challenges. Let me hand it over to Rohit to talk about how some of these challenges can be overcome. Can GBS organizations can overcome? Rohit, back to you.
Yeah, and I think some of the data we shared just now might be new to some of you, but the message has been loud and clear. There is an increasing gap in demand and supply. There is the situation out there is not very healthy and not very encouraging. I'm sure it keeps most of our viewer attendees on their toes. But how do we fix that? And today we want to share some of the analysis that we've been conducting here at Everest Group. So given our focus on the GBS markets and the work we do with our GBS, our clients in this segment, we have built a employer attractiveness benchmark. We track a large number of leading GBS organizations in various key markets. And today we wanted to show you a part of that analysis, which is picked for India market. What you see on the slide here in the 2x2 is an analysis of the brand perception for top 60 GBS organizations in India. And this has been evaluated on the basis of their policies with regards to compensation and benefits, various aspects of their work environment, flexibility, leadership, the career development that they provide with regards to the work profile, ability to go into global roles, ability to grow within the organization, various aspects of diversity, inclusion, belonging, the overall atmosphere. The data this is all based on outside an assessment. So the data collected is from all the public sources, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, Quora, Facebook, Twitter, many other forums where current and prospective employees share their inputs and feedback. Of course, we have a very sophisticated model that processes all of that, normalizes it, and then allows us to do comparative benchmarking. On the y-axis are how are you performing in these markets? How are some of the companies performing in this market? And this is where we've looked at metrics on retention, employee satisfaction, the gap in the number of the inflow and the outflow of the talent, the joiner exit ratio. And not surprisingly, there is a direct correlation between your brand perception in the market and how successful you are. So if you'll see kind of diagonally, moving from bottom left to top right of the chart, companies are scattered around. Of course, there are some companies who might not have a very strong brand but are still performing better. So companies in that quadrant are possibly, investing more. There is a bit of a lagging effect of some of the metrics as well. And then there are some companies who have a stronger brand perception, might still not be growing, is also a factor of your growth plans, some of the immediate, plans with regards to certain teams, changes in the work portfolio. But we don't see a lot in any in that quadrant anyway. Another interesting aspect is that on the top right, we have labeled all these dots. These are 60 real organizations with large scale operations across back office work, IT, and other areas in India. You'll see it's most of the firms, who are retail, CPG, tech, a healthcare company, some of the leading banking financial services firms, some of the leading energy utilities organizations. Clearly, they are kind of facing a lot of challenges. And this is specific to this industry. The GBS, the talent that you hire in GBS. So clearly the talent has an inclination for some of those tech firms as well. There is a surprise linked to this analysis coming up very soon. So watch out for that in a couple of minutes. But before that, let me double click on this and show what we are also doing is that behind each of these dots, there is very detailed analysis that shows the scorecards for each of the companies in terms of their brand perception levers, what is their comparative rating, what is helping them, kind of do better than others. And then even in terms of the success in the talent market, what exactly are the metrics behind it? We are helping a lot of our clients do this analysis and find ways to identify specific problems and then work on improving their attractiveness. Because you can operate in as many markets as you want, but if you're not able to attract and retain the right talent, it does not help. So those were some of the latest analysis that I wanted to show. And now, Sakshi, do you want to share the surprise offer we have for everyone today?
Sure. So for all the webinar participants from the buy side, which is basically enterprises and GBS organizations, we have a complimentary offer to help you compare your brand perception as an employer with 4 peers of your choice. So in the chat window, there is a link that has been posted. You can use that link to select a country where you have delivery operations. List up to 4 peers of your choice with whom you would like to compare yourself as an employer and your brand as an employer. And we will provide you with your brand perception rating analysis, similar to the analysis that you saw on the previous slide. So we'll tell you how you compare on a compensation, work environment, diversity, career development standpoint, and how those parameters are helping you succeed in the talent market. So where do you sort of rank and stack? So that offer is available to all the enterprises and GBS organizations who are on the webinar today, and they can benefit from the offer. Okay, let's continue. So in the next section, we will basically focus on the 4 levers that you actually saw on the x-axis. So we said these 4 levers are very important to build an organization's EVP or brand as an employer. And we will start sort of sharing what are the best practices, approaches that we are seeing across these 4 levers. We'll start with compensation and benefits. And, we believe there's a lot of focus on compensation and sometimes the focus on benefits is missed out. We believe both are equally, if not one is more important than the other. And my colleague Hisham will talk about some of the approaches that GBS organizations have adopted to meet these, evolving expectations of employees from a compensation and benefit perspective. Hisham?
Thanks, Sakshi. Sakshi, you and Rohit very aptly described how the talent wars are only intensifying. And we saw an effect of these talent wars and the widening demand-supply gap for skills. And one of the very tangible impacts was on the compensation and benefits that organizations are offering. So 2021, we saw an average of about 10 to 15% salary hikes in talent markets. And this number was not restricted only to IT roles, but was spread across tech, ops, so on and so forth. And the more niche a role became within its particular cluster, the higher the salary hikes we saw. And what was very interesting to see was that service providers, which in order to meet increased outsourcing demands, they had to scale relatively quickly. And they were offering almost 1.2 to 1.6x salary hikes compared to GBS organization in some cases. And we've seen significant movement of talent from GBS organizations to service providers, which is interesting because usually the talent movement tends to be in the opposite direction. So the net effect has been that today, GBS organizations are very actively competing with both service providers and startups which are offering greater salaries. And they've become their key competitors in talent markets. And going into 2022, we expect this trend to only continue. And we expect most service providers, startups, enterprises to be offering higher than usual salary hikes. So in this scenario, we propose that GBS organizations should be doing a few things to ensure that they maintain leadership in talent markets. One, they must proactively adjust their compensation bands and they must revisit their baselines. Second, they must proactively articulate total rewards, which is essentially the sum total of compensation and benefits that an organization is offering to its employees, because sometimes the headline salary may not portray the complete picture of benefits that an organization might be delivering to its employees. And finally, organizations must continuously leverage industry benchmarks to make sure that their compensation stays competitive. And as you were rightly mentioning, Sakshi, focusing only on compensations will not be sufficient. And organizations will have to update their benefit structure as well to meet evolving employee expectations. If we move on to the next slide, the pandemic has been transformational in various aspects. And one aspect it has significantly transformed is the benefits that are offered by organizations to their employees. The standard pre-pandemic benefits package is no longer relevant. So to give you an example, pre-pandemic, most organizations were offering standard health coverage to employees, which included coverage for the employee as well as their spouse and their immediate dependents. When the pandemic struck, most organizations stepped up. They said, we're going to also offer additional COVID allowances, and we'll also give a complimentary coverage for parents. Best-in-class organizations went a step further, and they said, we will not only formalize this health coverage for parents and employees, but we'll also maybe give you even dental and vision coverage as well. So there has been a spectrum over which organizations have evolved their benefits offering. And we saw during the pandemic that there was a spotlight on employee wellness and well-being. So organizations not only gave additional COVID leaves and mental health leaves to their organization or to their employees, but best-in-class organizations went a step ahead and they gave unmetered leaves and they gave dedicated wellness allowances. Similarly, learning and development has undergone a paradigm shift as well. And employees are now expecting anytime, anywhere access to learning. And they're looking for support from their organization to support both their personal and professional development. And finally, if we look at work from home today is no longer an exception. It is going to be very well part of the post-pandemic new normal. And best-in-class organizations are already going ahead of the curve, and they're helping employees adapt to the hybrid model more smoothly by giving them work from home allowances, helping them set up their work from home offices, so on and so forth. So in a nutshell, what has happened is that the competition has really upped their game when it comes to the benefits that they're offering to their employees. And GBS organizations will need to step up their game too in order to stay competitive. Talking about the new normal.
Isham, before you move on, I just want to make a point here, from what I've been observing is that in many of the traditional GBS markets, we talk about the Philippines, India, South Africa, Poland. In many of these markets, GBS organizations have always had a distinction over their traditional competitors, which is the third-party service providers. And it was because, you get to work for a larger or a direct buyer, the global brand, people policies are more global in nature, allegedly better work environment, right? There are mixed experiences on both sides. But there was always a very clear distinction in working for a GBS versus working for a third-party provider for most times. What COVID has done is that it has taken away or diluted that distinction to a large extent. And as Isham was just saying, almost everybody is focusing on flexibility, well-being, all of these aspects. This is what is creating a necessity for many of the GBS organizations to step up, re-benchmark their policies on benefits and their broader EVP, and then re-identify and re-articulate what is it that differentiates them. Why should candidates prefer them over others? So I think that this has become more important. And what happened during COVID, almost everybody was doing parts of it. So showing how are you different has become even more important.
Absolutely, Rohit. Absolutely. And I think that's also one of the things GBS organizations will need to focus on is how to seize the momentum back in terms of their market positioning vis-a-vis service providers and startups.
Yep. And as we kind of try to imagine the workplace of the future, and this is, I know, top of the mind for most of you, most of our GBS friends. Delivery models have evolved, and almost according to our latest research, about 70% of the GBS organizations have already started returning to work in one manner or the other. There's a lot of flexibility built around it. There are a lot of options. This is very voluntary right now, with starting to expect more and more employees to relocate back to their office locations. So what will future look like? Pre-pandemic, nobody envisioned remote to be a major, attraction for GBS. During pandemic, people were asking questions. They still are. If we'll ever go back, the debate still goes on. Employers and employees, there are a lot of contradictions on that. In fact, this is one of the biggest causes of worry. But we believe that hybrid is the way market is going to operate in future. And within that also there'll be many different models. Yeah, let's stay on the previous slide for a minute. So within hybrid, we will have many different models. It will not be a consistent homogeneous model. So there'll be teams who will work from office few days a week and then remotely few days a week. There'll be teams who will come in certain weeks and not come in certain weeks. And there'll be teams who at a team level, there'll be more democracy, no fixed pattern there. And these three, the top three categories within hybrid, is where we believe about 80-85% of the GBS workforce will operate. There are going to be remote first teams, but very selective, relatively tenured employees who can self-monitor their performance, teams that don't need to collaborate very often, teams who, when there is a need for collaboration, it's very specific, can be managed with different kinds of probably remote distributed, teams getting together, or very selective travel to office, which can be feasible from a logistics and cost perspective. So a lot of these consideration on the side. What is also interesting is that we see companies are trying to distribute their work portfolios by what is suitable for what kind of model of delivery, but also trying to divide their employees into certain persona categories based on who is fit or who might benefit from what type of work. So have some guardrails around it, what is absolutely not permitted, but within that operate with a lot of flexibility. And that is going to be the key word, especially in the next 1 year, because if your policies are not employee friendly or they are perceived to be not employee friendly, it can have a significant impact on your employee value proposition or cause attrition as competition is trying to scale up. As we go on to the next page, we want to talk about some interesting problems that it brings, right? We knew how to operate in offices. We figured out how to operate at home. But what about this truly, hybrid environment? Till now, this industry has not really experienced it. And as we scale that up, the need to ensure homogeneous employee experiences is going to be paramount. How do you avoid bias among teams that are operating in different areas? How do you provide them the equal level of attention, provide them the same level of support? So there are going to be some hard investments. You really need to think about how many locations do you need? How many offices do you need in those locations? and what is the purpose of these offices? Why should your employees come into these offices and at what frequency? You need to ensure the technology infrastructure. Earlier, offices were made in a manner that ensured employees could collaborate within the offices. Now they need to enable collaboration with everybody and anybody wherever they are, in a remote model as well. So all that technology infrastructure, there'll be a lot of duplicate technology infrastructure both at home and remotely, for teams which are working hybrid. Performance evaluation policies need to change. Are you tracking the right metrics at the right frequency in the right manner? So a lot of performance conversations need to happen differently. Policies and procedure, the risk outlay of your portfolio, how do you govern that? Will the regulatory bodies continue to provide you exemption that they did during COVID? How will that change? Right from SEC norms to allow you to hire remote teams to data security related guidelines, all of that is already requiring more investments. But that's not about it. It's not just about the dollars you invest in those areas, but it's also about how you invest in your leadership, your culture, the work environment. So we can think about what employees want, how those delivery teams will work, but what about the leadership? Is it able to navigate through all these different models and keep up with the different requirements of your groups? I already talked about homogeneous employee experiences. Will you see attrition of employees who are working from remote? Will they feel isolated? It happened during COVID. How do best of the organizations deliver that differentiated experience? Because if employees are not in office, ensuring work-life balance. What about people who now need to travel? What about personal lives of people who are at home? And more important than anything, how do you create that culture of trust? So there are still more questions than there are answers, but we see a lot of our friends in this industry working on it, and we're happy to kind of address specific topics there. With that, let me move on to cover our third action recommendation for the day, and this focuses on career development. There is a lot of change that has happened in employee expectations, and hence they are looking for different kind of work portfolio. So evolution in that is also important to stay attractive. Sakshi, what are your recommendations there?
Thanks, Rohit. So through our interactions with a lot of GBS organizations, one of the things that we have gathered is that the nature of career development opportunities that you provide to your employees is highly linked to the nature of work that you are delivering as a GBS organization. And what is the role your GBS organization is playing in the overall enterprise? On the left-hand side, I think most of us and probably everyone on this webinar will relate to the points that we have written, which is what are employees really looking for in their roles? They want to be relevant. They want to stay relevant. They want to be challenged. They want to be empowered. They want to deliver tangible outputs or impacts. They want to expand their skill set. They want to work in cross-functional teams, be recognized, feel appreciated, and also, have clarity on their career paths, global opportunities, and so on. So I'm sure all the GBS leaders who are listening to us, they will say, yes, this is what my employees really are looking for. The question is, what can GBS organizations really do to provide these opportunities? And I think the answer lies in the fact that the GBS organizations themselves need to evolve their persona. If you are a very cost-focused GBS organization or a GBS organization built around cost-saving mindset, the nature of opportunities that you will eventually provide to your employees will also be limited. So some of the things that we recommend GBS organizations do is increasing the share of higher order work in your GBS portfolio, create more global positions within the GBS, set up centers of excellence in the GBS, evolve GBS as a hub for creating, developing future leadership, not just for the GBS globally, but overall enterprise. And lastly, have a programmatic focus on skill development. Now, what's happening is we see many GBS organizations doing a couple of these. So, some are setting up COE, some have a very high focus on L&D, and so on and so forth. But what we are seeing is very few GBS organizations doing most or all of these, which is, I think, where the change needs to come. I think these all all 5 and probably a few more that are not listed here are very important. These need to be part of your strategy, your budgeting cycles, your planning cycles. So we believe that the model has matured enough that the GBS leaders can start elevating the role of GBS naturally to create natural career development opportunities. I think if you evolve the GBS persona, the career development opportunities for employee will automatically be a byproduct of that. So let's move to the next lever, which is, if you remember, the fourth lever on the x-axis was diversity. And my colleague Hisham will talk about what are some of the next generation themes from a DEIB perspective that organizations are going to adopt or are adopting, because we've all heard about gender diversity initiatives, but I think there is more to DEIB as a concept than just gender diversity. So Hisham, over to you.
Thank you, actually. DEIB, or diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, has the potential to provide incremental gains to GBS organizations. That's something that we can all agree on. But to action that or to operationalize that, GBS organizations will need to move beyond lip service and undertake focused initiatives. So DEIB has always been a fancy wrapper around the larger employer branding. But today, especially in the aftermath of the pandemic, and in general over the last few years, as the momentum has been building, the talent is asking hard questions. We've started hearing from our clients as to how prospective employees today want to know the specific DEIB initiatives their organization is undertaking. What is the organization doing beyond a couple of annual social events to acknowledge diversity and promote inclusion? What specific steps is the organization taking to increase the percentage of X or Y communities in the workforce? So on and so forth. So today's talent is judging prospective employers and taking hard decisions on these parameters. So focusing on DEIB is not just the right thing to do for organizations in this current scenario, but it is also critical from a talent management standpoint. And therefore, GBS organizations must evolve their approach to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiatives. So for an example, while you're ensuring that there should be more female participation in the workforce, you must also look at diversity beyond traditional gender diversity norms. You should look at diversity of LGBTQI plus communities. You should try and understand how you can include more differently abled individuals in your workforce. Similarly, while it is essential to give equal opportunities, it is also important to take a hard look at diversity across all experience levels, especially within the leadership. Similarly, it's also important to build a sense of belonging and embrace social accountability in all your DEIB efforts. And all of these efforts combined have the potential of not only enhancing the employer brand, but also improving employee experience, which in turn will, in the longer term, ensure more resilient talent strategy. And we have seen organizations very gradually gravitate from the traditional approaches and take on more and more next generation themes and incorporate those themes in their DEIB initiatives. And I think that's the way forward for all best-in-class GBS organizations. If you look at a couple of examples of how organizations are undertaking these DEIB initiatives, we see, for example, a lot of organizations offering focused health benefits to LGBTQI plus employees. So, for example, Nestle supports a specific financial support for their LGBTQI plus employees. So does TCS, for that matter, in India. Similarly, Societe Generale initiated a mission handicap to hire differently abled talent. Microsoft has an autism hiring program. Star and Disney India have launched a diversity resource group for their women and LGBTQI plus employees to support and represent their diverse workforce. These are just some of the many examples out there. And we have a lot of good examples of how organizations are moving beyond traditional gender diversity roles to make sure that their DEIB initiatives are more inclusive, more robust, and they allow them to design a much more comprehensive talent strategy. Our next action is going to be a bonus insight on how organizations can essentially build talent sustainability in their delivery portfolios. Sakshi, given your extensive experience working with clients on this subject, how do you see organizations incorporating talent sustainability in their delivery portfolios?
Sure. So organizations need to work on all the 4 levers that we discussed in the previous slides, which is comp and ben, work environment, diversity, and career development opportunities. And we saw there is a very high correlation between those and your talent and your success in the talent market. But we also believe that none of this will really work if you are not in the right locations, and if you're not in the locations that provide enough talent sustainability. Some of the levers that we discussed are short and medium term levers. The long-term strategy is to be in the right markets which can provide sustainable talent. So what are the key considerations, in today's world for building a sustainable talent strategy? You need to understand what are the skills that you need today and tomorrow, and what is the competition level for those skills. What's happening from an environmental and geopolitical risk perspective. I mean, the whole sea situation, we all are aware, and how that is changing the game for talent strategy for many years to come. Work from anywhere. We talk about work from home, but is there a work from anywhere play that you can build in your strategy? Demographic, diversity, we talked about the population pyramids earlier, and we didn't show some of the other pyramids, but if you really look at some of the upcoming locations, let's say Africa, those are the locations where a lot of talent is going to join workforce in the near future. And then social and governance responsibility. You may want to consider impact sourcing. You may want to hire people who are underprivileged and so on. So the considerations of talent strategy in the next generation or the years to come, I would say, is quite different from the considerations that were there 3 years, 4 years ago. Let's look at the next slide. And we also had a question coming in the Q&A window around what are the upcoming locations. So this slide will hopefully cover some of that, but I'll also answer it after the presentation is over. So what you're seeing on this slide is, again, an X and Y axis 2x2 chart. On the X axis, we have the future talent potential of locations from low to high, and on the Y axis, we have the current potential or current readiness from low to high. So if you look, let's look at this in clusters. If you see the 2 blue boxes, which is the onshore geographies and the nearshore Europe locations, the current level of talent readiness is very high, but the future talent potential is not very high. The reason is population aging, population pyramid, and now the Ukraine crisis and how it's impacting the whole nearshore Europe. That's another layer added on to it. The next bucket is the middle one, which is the Latin America and the Caribbean region and Asia Pacific. From a current talent market readiness, it's moderate to high. Most of you are leveraging, Asia Pacific. Some of you are leveraging Latin America. You may be working with service providers. So you all have experience in these markets, and these are sustainable enough, from a short to long-term perspective. However, the markets are maturing, the rate of growth may slow down. You may have to look at tier 2, tier 3 locations in Asia Pacific particularly. Whereas as far as LAC region is concerned, while the population pyramids may be, supportive or interesting, the geopolitical macroeconomic situation may need close monitoring. So again, from a future potential, good news, bad news kind of a story. If you look at the last box, which is Africa, the current talent readiness is quite low, is very low. I think probably 10% of people on this webinar, or maybe 5%, may have some experience of leveraging any country in Africa. However, that's where we expect a lot of growth to come in from. The future talent potential is high, given the volumes, given the population pyramids, given the investments that are happening from a skill development perspective, and given how some of the leading organizations globally are taking the charge of, building these, countries into hubs for, global services delivery. So net, Africa can be the next India, probably, maybe in 15 years. However, to make that happen, a lot of enabling ecosystem needs to be developed, a lot of investment needs to go in shaping the talent market. So as you are thinking about long-term talent strategy, look at where you are in terms of your portfolio. Is most of your portfolio concentrated in locations which are in the top left of this chart, which means you may be doing good now, you may be able to sustain nicely for the next 3 years, 4 years, but then is it a long-term strategy? If a lot of it is in the bottom right, then basically you may be well positioned from a long-term strategy perspective, but then internally the initiatives you need to push on will be around enhancing talent readiness and making talent more suitable to work in the kind of work that you would want to deliver. Let's move to the next slide, where we have prepared a checklist of potential strategies to enhance your talent sustainability. Some of it is, what I discussed in the previous slide. I think the question is, how many of these strategies are on your radar? You could look at portfolio optimization. You could look at satellite hubs. You could look at next wave locations, Africa, Kenya, some of the locations in Latin America, probably. Obviously, you can look at outsourcing to sort of diversify your location portfolio by bringing another third party in the system. You could look at permanent work from home model, which then opens up, different locations from where you can hire, impact sourcing, right? And then employment model. So can you look at, gig workers and so on and so forth. So I think we talked about 5 things today in the webinar. 4 are more short to medium term. This is something which is more of a long-term play. And I think a nice combination of all these 5 can help you fight both the talent battles in the short term and talent wars in the long term. With that, I'll hand it over back to Rohit.
Hey, thanks, Akshi. And you just said we covered 5 actions today. Let's just do a quick recap before we move on to take questions from the attendees today. So number 1, only a strategy focused only on compensation purely or only on benefits and not the hard compensation won't work. You need a good mix of both. You need to stay ahead of your competition. Action 2, work environment is important, and the definition of work environment is evolving. It's becoming more complex, more hybrid. So supersize your efforts, get ahead because it's getting real. People are already returning. How do you not only manage it on both the ends, remote and in office, but also how do you provide a seamless experience across both? Number 3, career development, very important. The entire GBS market has evolved. The role of the GBS, the portfolio, is focusing on higher order skills, more global roles, more transformation versus low cost delivery. As that happens, accelerate your pivot towards that, because then you can attract the best of the talent and give them meaningful career opportunities or more meaningful career opportunities. As Isham said, lip service won't work anymore. Employees are asking real questions and making decisions to not work with some of the top global brands if they are not convinced about their diversity, inclusion, and other social policies. So you need to get real, as you attract the latest talent. And lastly, do all of that, but also need to ensure that your talent pipeline is sustainable. So to do that, relook at your portfolio. Literally, as Sakshi was sharing all those options, it feels like everything is on the table. We see many organizations using different strategies and a mix of strategies based on where they are currently operating, what is the nature of talent they need. So definitely time to relook at your portfolio. And with that, let me re-emphasize on our the CTA offer, the special offer we have today. We are already starting to receive a few requests. While we were there previously, there is a link in the chat window that you can use to make this request. But to re-emphasize, you saw the scatter plot and the list of top 10 companies earlier. If you want to pick a market where you are operating and compare yourself with 4 peers of your choice, note that this is something we do for our members of our Talent Excellence program. But today we are opening it up on complimentary basis to all the buyers, GBS clients. Let us know which is that location, what are those peers, and we'll run this analysis and do a complimentary session for you to walk you through this scorecard and tell you where do you stand among them, and what are they doing better, or what are you doing better? So take this offer. You can take the link or write to either of the three of us separately in case you miss out right now. That brings us towards the end of the planned conversation for today. So let me open up and use the rest of the time for some questions and answers. Let me start with the first question we received in the in the chat today. There are many, we might not be able to cover all, but I'll see how many of them we can cover. So there was a direct question on that most of your employees, they have a lot of offers, and the dropout ratio is high. You are making offers, but employees are not joining. What do you do to fix that? And then there's a question linked to onboarding. So I assume that's not able to successfully onboard those employees. So let me share very tactical suggestions on what we have seen working, right? One, improve your channel mix and increase the portion of employees coming through referrals. Many companies who have analyzed these offer dropout ratios have seen that employees who are coming in through referrals, where there is a stickiness, there is some direct feedback, there is some direct incentive for your employees to ensure they join, the dropouts is lower. Second, try to reduce that time window. So can you make the hiring process more optimal? Can you do back-to-back interviews? Can you provide very objective feedback? Can you improve their interview experience by making them interact with senior stakeholders, showcasing your overall benefits policy, your EVB, your social policy is better, and then also give them less time to explore different options. Third, this doesn't help the community, but helps individuals. Opening more positions, plan for some of these dropouts ahead. And fourth, which is again not an ideal solution, but companies are buying out notice periods wherever they can. And fifth, stay engaged. Stay engaged with your candidates, multiple touch points, talk about how they are preparing to transition, inform them more about team, include them in some of the team events even before they have joined, so as to start making them feel more connected to the organization. So again, very, very tactical suggestions, but these are the things that have helped some of your peers. Let me switch over and ask some different questions. We still have about 10 minutes on the clock, so we can do 3 to 4 more questions. Sakshi, let me ask you one. What are the new and emerging talent hubs which are overlooked to tap potential talent? So from a location strategy, what are the locations where not many are going, and some of our attendees can tap into that?
Yeah, so I would say, across various regions, there are multiple locations which are, showing a lot of activity, a lot of interest. So I wouldn't call them overlooked, but probably, some of the organizations which have largely constrained their portfolio to, let's say, India, Philippines, Poland, may not have explored some of these locations. So within Asia, we are seeing a lot of interest in Vietnam and Singapore. Singapore primarily for very niche capabilities, very high order work, not for large scale centers, but there is definitely interest in Singapore and also in Vietnam. Within the Europe region, there is a lot of interest in Spain and Portugal right now, given what's happening in Ukraine and its sort of impact on Poland, some of the latest news coming out of Hungary. There is lots and lots of interest in Spain and Portugal. They are high cost locations. They are not as cheap as what you would find, in Poland, Romania, etc. But I think they provide a good balance of talent, language capabilities, and some arbitrage over, more high cost locations. There is also a lot of interest in Ireland and Northern Ireland. Again, something we have always seen from a contact center perspective, from a tech perspective in case of Dublin, and again that interest is sort of reviving. Let's come to Americas. I think in Americas, lots and lots of interest, inquiry for Mexico, especially for tech delivery, as companies are looking for alternatives or diversifying their risk portfolio beyond India. A lot of interest in Mexico. I would say there is also a lot of interest in Costa Rica and Colombia. Not at the same level as Mexico right now, but still, we expect a lot of activity in these two markets. Again, for the same reasons, that same time zone, people want diversification beyond India, and so on and so forth. By the way, when I say all of this, I don't mean to intend that the focus on India and Philippines is like going down. I think that that's standing there, that's stable, because these are locations which will give large scale talent to people, but these are some of the upcoming or locations of a lot of interest. And finally, Africa. The key country, South Africa, I think most of you are aware, has a strong value proposition, and is one of the I would say mature locations or established locations for global services. The other locations where we are seeing some interest is Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda. So these are 4 locations in Africa where we are again picking up a lot of interest. And last but not the least, for companies trying to find alternatives for Ukraine, primarily for product engineering, product development, Israel is right now top of the charts from an interest perspective. Again, not the location probably cannot sustain all the demand that is likely to going to come there, but there is a lot of interest right now in Israel.
Thanks, Sakshi. And one follow-on question is, as organizations think about Africa, how developed or underdeveloped is that location? And the exact question is, what does it take to stand up a location there with the confidence that they have the available workforce GBS organizations need?
Yeah, I think at this point, we are seeing more interest from a third-party provider perspective, leveraging both regional and some of the global companies. I think from a GBS perspective, you may want to test waters by going with a service provider who really understands the market, understands the talent, understands the constraints. And as you understand the market dynamics, understand how to leverage the potential of the talent, you can potentially look to set up your own center, GBS. But I would say majority of the activities via third parties. That includes regional and local providers as well. So sort of that answers your question. I think the key investment that is needed in most African markets, including South Africa, is around talent development. There is the talent really wants to work in this kind of environment, these kind of white collar jobs and so on and so forth. But I think they may not have the right skill set, and that's where a lot of training and sort of intervention comes into picture.
Thanks, Sakshi. Hisham, let me ask you another question. As due to work from home, employees lack a sense of belonging. So one, what is GBS leadership team doing to address that concern? How does that help check attrition? Another related question, not exactly on engagement, but is on wellness, is that will a full wellness specter play an important role in retaining talent in future? So if you can just emphasize a bit about engaging remote workers and the wellness aspect of the EVP.
I think, Rohit, very pertinent questions, and these are questions we are hearing from our clients almost on a daily basis now. When it comes to, in particular, building a sense of belonging, I think a couple of things are very important, and a lot of GBS organizations are already doing that. It's essentially, how do you show that the organization cares about individual employees, how the organization cares about the larger society, and how do you encourage employee-led organizations? So the first factor, how do you encourage a culture where employees check in on each other? How do you encourage a culture where managers check in on employees regularly in terms of their well-being? A lot of GBS organizations have set up specific leadership check-ins, wherein leaders take out a specific time either each week or each month, and they check in with employees. So that builds a culture which shows that the organization really cares about the individual. Another thing is, how does the organization care about the larger society? And we've seen this. Organizations today are emphasizing the work that they do in uplifting the society in general, and they try to brand that and show employees and try to associate the employees' individual aspirations with those, and they try to bind that together. And they've seen a lot of success because employees want to work with an organization that really cares about the society that they are a part of. And finally, I think encouraging employee-led organizations is very important. Resource groups, wellness groups, and that ties into a larger question about wellness that you just asked. Uh, Within the larger benefit spectrum, I think focus on wellness is going to be key going forward, because the experience that employees have had during and post-COVID, that will persist for a long time, and organizations that focus and emphasize on what they're doing for employee wellness and well-being will have a distinct edge in talent markets for sure.
Got it.
Rohit,
Thanks.
I wanted to make a point on the previous question around dropouts and onboarding. I think other trend that we are seeing in the market is the boomerang employees. So employees that have recently left the organization, as part of Great Resignation, they are wanting to come back. This is also sort of a new trend that's happening in the market. And I think the implication for organizations for this is that obviously your boomerang employees know your culture, know the organization, they can be onboarded very quickly, and so on and so forth. So I think they can get to productivity very quickly. I think the implication is that organizations also need to invest in their alumni initiatives. Again, depending on how big, how small you are, focusing on the alumni of your organization, because they are also a source of talent which really understands your organization and can be a potential good fit, again, if it works mutually on both sides. And that is something that we would also recommend organizations to look into.
And Sakshi, just to stretch that, not just the alumni experience, but I think the exit experience. So we've been talking about the onboarding experience a lot, but it is also important to provide good exit experience, be fair, be kind, continue all those benefits. At the same time, we expect professionalism from employees as well, but that can also ensure in the short term or long term. Everest, we are a very specialized organization, but even we had a couple of boomerang employee examples in the last year. So it definitely helps, can relate to that. There was also a question on the same topic. So thanks for covering that, Sakshi. Let me take one last question myself, because I find this particularly interesting, is that what GBS as a community, do better to manage the crisis together? Absolutely love that question. We work in the global services industry, and when we're looking at the provider community, the GBS community, and then all the other client segments. And in GBS, this is good. There's a sense of brotherhood. Your parent organizations or your enterprises you work with might be competing, but as GBS, you're willing to help each other within certain boundaries. So definitely, I think from a talent perspective, while all of this helps you get better project-ready talent, improving the quality of talent coming out of institutions is important. One of my colleagues used to say the quality of school buses in India is not great. That's a long queue you have, but the quality needs to improve. And that's part of the problem. When demand increased, everybody went after each other's talent. How do you improve the quality of talent coming in? Because there is ample supply to that manner. So that is where I think GBS community can come together, work more with institutions, training institutions, academic institutions, to improve the readiness of fresh talent. That's definitely one thing. There are more things, but we are running out of time today. So I wanted to make that comment. With that, let me thank everyone. There might be a couple of announcements, but we continue to help our clients with regards to our talent excellence program. As you receive the slides, you'll see some of the recommended reading material as well. Those who joined late, please take a look at the EVP scorecards we showed, and feel free to avail the CTA offer. And for those who have requested the CTA, we'll get in touch with you and get back with your benchmarks in the next few days. And thanks everyone for attending.